We're looking at a third process now. Remember, we've looked at revenue process, we've looked at purchase process. Now this is payroll process. And we're going to be using the same approach. Remember, it's internal control. And what is auditor's response to internal control? The approach is always to understand, to document, evaluate controls, and test those controls if they are properly designed. So it's the same for every process. Yeah. Now, payroll process. What's payroll process all about? It's just looking at how salary is paid. You all work somewhere, right? But one thing I will tell you is for this paper, the approach is to assume that salary is paid per hour. So the focus is generally on those labor man hours, right? For the fixed permanent staff, it's very simple, right? So we're going to be focusing mainly on that assumption that staff are labor man hours. So we will calculate the salary based on the hours worked. Likewise, you also need to note that salary will be computed by computer. So salary is calculated by computer system. Gone are those days when people calculate salary manually. There is no such company today that will be calculating staff salary using paper and pen. Computers will always be the tool for calculating the salary. So please take note of that. I'm giving you this background so that by the time we go into the controls, risk, and all of that, you are able to understand why we are not talking too much, because this is a pretty short process. Yeah. If anything is calculated by computer, which means it's automated, remember, then it means that the likelihood of error is very slim. That is it. Because for computer, whatever you put into computer is what you get. If that output is wrong, then it means the input is wrong. So where things can go wrong will mostly be at the point of input for payroll. So it's either the input is wrong or the input has been fraudulently edited. This is where the problem can come from. Majorly, that is where the problem can come from. And when we start looking at the risk and what could go wrong, you'll see that there will be a lot of discussions around this input. Though, in terms of the processing by the computer and the payment to the staff, things can still go wrong, and we'll look at it. But the major issues are going to come from this input stage. Now, if you put a rubbish in computer will give you rubbish. But if you put correct data into the system, you will get correct output. Because payroll is calculated by computer system. Now let's try and understand the process before we go into the risk and controls. How does it work? You want to pay staff. That is your objective. You want to pay your staff. How do you pay the staff? The first thing that you must do is at least you need to employ the person, right? So which means you need to put in the employee details in the system. So input, step one will be to input the employee or the staff details into the system. Because that's the only way you know who you are paying. So you need to put details such as the name of the staff, the salary information of the staff, because you must have agreed hourly rate, how much you're going to pay the staff for every hour he works. Likewise, where is the salary going to be paid? The bank details of the staff, you collect that. Yeah, all this information are usually collected at the point of recruitment, and you can relate with this very well. All these information are called standing data because they don't change often. So they are usually standing data or permanent data because they are relatively permanent. Not that they are permanent forever, but compared to other information you will see as we move on, you see that the name of staff doesn't change often. The salary information will not also change often because it will only change when management decides to increase salary or you are promoted, and that doesn't happen every day. Likewise, the bank details, a staff will not be changing bank every day, not even every month, not likely even every year. right? So relatively, this type of information are standing data, they don't change often. So once you put in the information of the staff into the system, then the next thing is to determine how many hours this staff has worked, because he will start working after recruitment, right? So then you need to put number of hours work into the system. Because at this point, you are preparing to pay the staff. Yeah, so employees earn salary by working. If you don't work, you are not entitled to pay. And when you work, we need to know the number of hours you have worked to know how much we're going to pay you. Because the third stage is that the computer calculates the payroll. So payroll is calculated by the system. When I say payroll, it means the amount of salary. This is salary that we're talking about. So it's just used intermittently. So payroll is calculated by the system. Here, the computer now determines how much you will get. And that involves a couple of things. There will be statutory deduction also involved here. The computer will have to deduct that from your salary, from the gross amount, before you are paid some certain. So statutory deductions is something like pay your tax, yeah, or pension. Those deductions that are supposed to be made before you collect your salary. So these are deducted at source. And the last stage is the payment. Staff is paid. Yeah, and this can be bank transfer, which is the preferred bank transfer. And it can also still be cash payment. Though I think this will be rare, but definitely some company will still be paying their staff by cash. Right, and you're also expected to know the risk and controls when you use any of these approaches. Right. So that is the summary. It's very short. It's just this 4 process. Put the details in the system, get the number of hours the staff has worked, calculate how much you need to pay the staff, and pay the staff. Yeah, this payroll calculation is simply just step 2, which is number of hours work. Yeah. Multiply by the rate, which must be part of the salary information. That is what we're talking about. It's about the rate. Okay. Now let's summarize it as we normally do, which is breaking it down into the process, the risk, what can go wrong, the control objective, how to achieve the control objective, and the test procedure the auditors can use. The first step, like we said, is that employee details must be put into the system. So employee details into the system. And while you are trying to do this, think about what can go wrong. The first thing that can go wrong is that the details being put into the system is wrong, or it's a fake employee. The employee does not exist. So wrong details or fake employees are created. In the system. That is very possible. And what is the control objective? Control objective will be for us to ensure that only valid employees are created in the system. So remember how we started is to say to ensure, because it's an objective, that only valid employees are created in the system. Remember, if you put invalid employees, you are putting into the system, so the system will still do whatever you want it to do, because it's what you garbage in that you're going to get. And what will be the control that will help us achieve this objective? We need to ensure that we have new staff form, which means every time we recruit a staff, we'll give that staff a form to fill their details. When they fill in their details, they must take that details to HR director, and HR director will see the staff and approve by signing on the form. That validates the form that the staff is valid and the form has been signed and approved. And in addition to that, when that staff details is put into the system, a director must still approve the details in the system by checking what has been put into the system against the form he has signed. With that, it's very unlikely to have a fake staff or a wrong data in the system. So there are two controls I will be talking about there. The first one is that there's a new staff form. So this form is reviewed and signed by the HR director. That validates the form. Then after the staff addition in the system. So staff addition must be approved by the HR director in payroll system. Very important. And how will auditors test this? Auditors just needs to sample staff addition, the staff addition form, that is new staff form, and check for HR director's signature, which makes sense. Remember, auditors looking for evidence. So check for the signature, and for the approval in the system as well, auditors need to sample new staff and check for HR director approval in the system. So that is all the auditors will need to do to test those controls. Very important controls. And it's not just that can go wrong while you are trying to create a staff. There is also more that can go wrong, because you could have created this staff and this staff has left and you're still carrying a data that does not belong to anybody. Does it mean that the computer will not calculate? If you leave the information there and you put the number of hours work for such staff, computer will always calculate, because computer doesn't know what is going on. So you need to be sure that the data in the computer is always accurate. So another thing can go wrong is that the data of X staff is left in the system. Usually when a staff leaves a company, the staff data should be taken off the payroll, right? So our control objective is to ensure that the data of X staff are immediately taken off the payroll system. Very, very important. That is our control objective. And how do we achieve this control objective? So we need to have, the same way we have a new staff form, we need to have a leavers form. So when a staff leaves, there's also a form that they need to fill. Once they fill that form, then HR directors should approve the removal of that staff, right? So that is the process, that's going to be the control, similar to what we have for addition. So leavers, that's the staff that has left. So that a leavers form must be filled and staff removal from the system must be approved by the HR director. Right. So by the time the guy has filled the form that he has left, then maybe a manager or an officer, a payroll officer, can go into the system, initiate deletion of the data, however, must not be able to do it until the HR director approves it. So once the HR director approves on the system, it leaves the payroll system. Yeah, and this is easy for auditors to test. All they need to do is to check, to pick samples of leavers form and go into the system to be sure that the data has been removed and the removal was also approved by the HR director. So auditors need to sample leavers form, check that staff details have been removed from the system and removal was approved by HR director. Very important, guys. Because payroll is a very sensitive process. It's one of the commonest way you see fraud in an organization. Yeah. It doesn't end there. You could have put the right data in the system, but what if somebody goes into the system and change that data fraudulently? Maybe the rate you agree with the staff is $6 per hour, but someone goes and say, I'm going to change it to $10 per hour for you, but for every extra $4 you get, you give me $2. So someone can try to do fraud. So another thing that can go wrong in that sense is fraudulent change of data. Remember, it's computer that is doing it, so it's important we have correct data. So fraudulent change in existing data, that's another risk. And what do we want to achieve? We want control that will ensure that only valid changes are made to staff payroll data. Very important. And what control will help us to achieve this? There are two controls we're going to look at. First of all, we want a control that will ensure that only changes that have been approved by HR director are made. That's the control we want. So, and this will be in two dimensions. First of all, the request for change must be in writing so that everybody can see that somebody requested for that change, and the justification will be there. Then that written request is what the HR director will now approve. That is a kind of preventive control. A detective control can also help this one, whereby on a weekly basis, the HR director can just generate a change data report from the system, because system can give you such a report. Just to say, give me all the report of changes that have been made to data. this week. Then the director can check whether he actually approved those changes. So those are the two controls that can help us. So the first one is that all change requests must be made in writing, and approved by HR director. That's one. The second control is the detective control, which means change data reports should be generated weekly. And validated by the HR director. Very important. And how will auditors test each of these controls? All auditors need to do here is to sample some change request or change already made, and check for written approval by the HR director. So auditor checks some changes that have been made, and auditor will be asking, where is HR approval for this? And likewise, the sample reports can be taken as well by the auditors. Sample data change report, and see evidence of review by HR director. So sample data change report and check for evidence of review by HR director. And that is it for the employee details in the system.